Hello and welcome back. Today I would like to introduce you, if you have not become acquainted already, with what I think is probably the best value whisky in the UK right now. And it's not a UK whisky. This stuff is... cool, a lot of text on there, wall of text much. This stuff is regularly available here in the UK supermarkets for around £23, which in my opinion for the flavour and that 50.5% ABV that you get with this one is phenomenal. Easily on par with the equally very affordable Cutty Sark Prohibition Edition, but probably even better, providing you like bourbon. So yeah, this is, as you've all guessed, Wild Turkey 101. There is also a Wild Turkey 81, and the numbers on this one, it comes from the US proof system, which is not the same as the older UK proof system, which was a little bit more meaningful. The UK proof system was all about a test that enabled people to check the proof of a spirit without going into too much of a science experiment. The US proof system is simply the ABV multiplied by 2. So with this Wild Turkey 101, 101 divided by 2 is 50.5% ABV. There is also a Wild Turkey 81, which is 40.5% ABV. And for a long time, the Wild Turkey 81 was kind of the standard Wild Turkey. You don't really tend to see the Wild Turkey 81 that much in the UK supermarkets anymore, which I think is really, really interesting. The fact that with this Wild Turkey bourbon, because I think Wild Turkey bourbon is... I think it's meant to be the number one premium bourbon sold worldwide. Whatever premium means, we won't get into that. But it's interesting that even UK supermarket consumers are opting for a better presented, higher strength bourbon. And that's really not surprising. It's not surprising to me or you or anyone who remotely knows what Whiskey Tube is. If you're an enthusiast, you know that alcohol is flavour, and that counts for something. But it's surprising considering that this push for better presentations, in this case a 50% spirit from a supermarket, is not something that we're seeing at all in the world of whiskey. It's not happening in supermarket Scotch, possibly because supermarket Scotch is dominated and controlled by a small handful of huge multinationals who believe in volume over quality. But that's a matter for another day. This whiskey here is a wonderful whiskey. I like this one a lot, and I've had a lot of bottles of it over a lot of years. It's a Kentucky bourbon. It's produced at the Wild Turkey Distillery, which is owned by Austin Nichols, who are now owned by Campari. And very relevantly for this channel and me and my audience and what I talk about and like, I think that this is a fantastic bourbon, possibly the best bourbon for Scotch drinkers. I think that this, and Wild Turkey in general, I think that it's not overly sweet as some bourbon can be, and I think that's largely due to the fact that the mash bill at Wild Turkey is lower in corn. I also think it's got excellent body, good complexity and balance, and I think that this bourbon is probably closer in style to Scotch, or at least the kind of things that Scotch drinkers appreciate, than most bourbons are. Just my opinion. So let's get some in the glass and see if America's famous bird is any better than Scotland's famous bird. Bloody better be. Are there more than one famous bird in American whiskey and Scotch whiskey? It's famous grouse and Wild Turkey, right? Redbreast. Redbreast would be the Irish one, wouldn't it? Are there more bird whiskies? There probably are. Let me know in the comments. Excellent bourbon. When I think of good bourbon, this is really my benchmark for quality bourbon as a Scotch drinker. So, on the nose, little bit, and I don't know why I always start this off with a kind of negative sounding note, because it's not negative, but a little bit of a wood glue note on the nose, as well as some corn flakes. You can tell that even though this is a lower corn mash bill, there's definitely some corn or maize in there. Corn flakes, corn syrup, a little bit of grassiness, which I think is coming from the rye in this one, which compared to other distilleries, there is more rye in general in Wild Turkeys than most bourbon. Grassy, oaky, polished oak, quite nutty, which is something that I quite often get on bourbons, like raw peanuts, like the peanuts that you get either with the red skins still on, or the ones that you get where you pop them out of the shells yourself, raw peanuts. Sweet, floral, spicy rye. Sweet and spicy, nutty. Very good. Let's see how it tastes. When it comes to bourbon, Wild Turkey 101 is very much my happy place. And as you saw there, that colour, one of the really great things about bourbon is that you know with any bourbon, not just the premium stuff, but any bourbon, because of law, if it's marketed as bourbon in America, it's natural colour. So that reasonably dark colour, you know, is coming from the cask, every bit of it. On the palate, again, sweet and spicy. Really great mouthfeel coming through from that 50.5 ABV. I have had the Wild Turkey 81, and I can tell you exactly how many bottles of Wild Turkey 81 that I've bought, because this stuff has always been available to me. And with this stuff available, the number of bottles of Wild Turkey 81 that I've bought is this much. One. Because I bought one, tried it, and thought, this is good, but it's just not got the delivery and the intensity and the flavour that you get from that higher strength product. Getting some really nice syrupy oak coming through, like an oak stave dipped into fresh corn syrup. It's pouring off. Beautiful. Lovely syrupy oak, really nice grassiness, spicy oakiness, lots of caramel. And again, something that I really love in bourbon is peanut brittle. So again, kind of like raw peanuts with a crystallized sugar confectionery note. As for the finish, good excuse for another sip, isn't it? Excellent experience, excellent flavours. Love that syrupiness and the nuttiness and the perfect amount of oak and perfect amount of spice coming from the oak and the rye. As for the finish, long, probably one of the longer finishes that I've had from bourbon. Smooth and sweet and grassy, more of that slightly raw peanut note, peanut brittle and caramel. All the flavours are just with you from first sip right through to the end of the finish. So I think this is a really great dram, and it's one that I'd buy again and again, especially, as I mentioned before, at the offer price, which we quite regularly see at lots of different UK supermarkets, which is about £23. I think it's a real no-brainer. £23 for a bottle of this, at the strength and the flavours that you get, no-brainer. And that high strength also means that if you're looking for a bourbon that you're going to be sipping and mixing, then the high strength means that it mixes really well. It cuts through any flavours that you put with it. And I was having a little bit of fun with it, but when Jeff at G Whisky challenged me to the 5 whiskies challenge and I had to pick a mixer, I don't think it was what I actually picked, but I mentioned this stuff and chocolate milk. Sounds bizarre, but the nuttiness and the syrupiness that you get with this, combined with that kind of slightly malty, creamy chocolatiness that you get from the chocolatey milk, it's a winning combination. But really, this stuff will mix really well with whatever you put it with, whilst being equally perfect to sip neat. And I think it's really all about that balance. The sweet syrupiness, the nuttiness, and the spiciness from the rye in the cask. It's just that perfect balancing act. This really is one of my favourite bourbons of all time. Yes, the Wild Turkey Rare Breed is better, but when you consider the price that you can get this stuff on offer, you have to pay probably over twice the price for a moderate increase in quality with a rare breed, which, even to a whiskey enthusiast like me, is probably not worth paying. And I'm showing my age here, my age and my veteran whiskey enthusiast status, when I started buying this stuff, Wild Turkey 101 actually had an 8-year-old age statement. And yes, again, the old 8-year-old age statement, it was better. This new stuff, they say, if you do a little bit of digging online, that it's between 6 and 12 years old. But in my humble opinion, I think that this stuff is probably mostly closer to 6, and that's fine. But yeah, the old 8-year-old Wild Turkey 101.8, it was better. But such is the way with modern whiskey. That stuff is gone now. You can't get it. Luckily, what we're left with the standard Wild Turkey 101 is still really, really great. I think especially if you're a Scotch drinker looking for a bourbon that might appeal to your sensibilities, or if you're trying to get into bourbon, this one is really, really worth a try. Let me know what you think about Wild Turkey. And if you've thought of any more bird whiskies, I can think of lots with birds on the label or the logo. Can't think of any other bird whiskies at the moment. But let me know what you think about this, bourbon in general, and whether you agree with me that this is a good bourbon for Scotch drinkers. Thanks for joining me today. Really appreciate it. See you in the comments, and cheers.